of course, when they finished, they completed the thing. Okay, so a little background on what we did. This time around, it was a bit more unconventional. So we decided that we will build a bottle wall. So we will collect trash in the village. So like all around is like, because waste management is something that is not common in the village. So they actually generally package it up, they burn it. So no matter whether it's organic or inorganic trash. So this is one very starting thing when the volunteers went for their recce trip, they realized. I've always been there, I always think that that's like the least of the concern. But since it's something that they picked up, they wanted to do something about it. But besides that, we were also looking at infrastructure. So we wanted to build a new classroom. So we did a hybrid of both in the sense that can we think of something environmental at the same time actually also provide them with their infrastructure help. So what they did was they proposed this project of building a wall with bottles. That means 1.5 liter Coca-Cola bottles. We pack it with rubbish, so all the inorganic trash, and then you actually tie it using the chicken coop, and you actually make a wall out of it. If you are interested, that's called the Bottle School. So we adapted from there and we only built a wall. Yeah, but during the whole course of actually doing it, it's not as simple as it sounds. Because firstly, the trash has to be clean. So they pick the trash up, they have to wash it, dry it, and then then pack it into the bottle. So we thought that we could finish the whole wall, but we only finished 1/6 of it. Yeah, and we went there for 16 days. So it was like, a lot of things, but eventually it's really like the leader has to believe in what you're doing. It actually, in fact, then I asked the host a lot of questions. The host actually told me that before we went, because we asked them to collect the trash and the bottles as well, because we didn't want to just bring bottles, and eventually if they do not have the 1.5 liter bottles there, they won't be able to continue the project. So when they went out to do that, many other villagers actually questioned them as well. They said, if the foreigners are helping you, why are they asking you to do this? Yeah. So he actually told me that he and his boys, they call them boys, cried after that. So I actually also shared this story with the volunteers. But eventually he do also see that eventually, in that short, 16 days is quite long, but it's also quite short. In that 16 days, he actually told us, he came back to tell us that he now sees some households actually keeping, like, separating trash and knowing like this is inorganic, organic, and there's actually a change in attitude because the foreigners are here to help them wash their trash, hang it up, and like everything. So it's more of like, it's small little things like that also motivates us to continue. But first, then the belief must be there. But the belief is not a dream. It's something that you could actually ask and try to find out. Like what you say, so are you contributing or are you not? Then go out and ask right questions. I mean, it may not be just a direct question, but do go in and find out. And I think that kind of questioning would also, I think that's what exactly they said just now during their presentation, strengthen your conviction in terms of what you believe service is and stuff. Yeah.
Can I add on my response, because I realized I was looking from my own perspective. I'm guessing that in quite a number of secondary schools, teachers are involved in OCIP trips, and if I'm not wrong, I think they typically last from say 5 days to 8 days, some of which are planned by travel agents or organizations and so on. I think for me, if I were doing that, big group, short duration, not really involved in the planning and so on, I think after a couple of trips, for me personally, I would start to feel disengaged. Yeah, because unless you're actually involved in the planning and so on, it's harder to be disengaged, to be engaged. To me, that's important, and that maybe could be a reason. I don't know.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Angel. I have a few questions. I think it's sort of related to each other. There are many questions, like you said. There's some questions, common questions, like people saying, why don't you help back home rather than overseas? And you said that that's not quite important to really sort it out. I personally feel that it is important because whether you're helping overseas or Singapore, then the sort of in some way the goal could be a bit different. What I meant is overseas, if you're helping some villages who are very poor, and comparing to helping Singaporeans or people here who are also very poor, I think the learning could be different because the poverty there and the problems there and here would be different. So I personally feel that whoever is helping, or the student or the person helping, should sort of identify these goals very specifically, because it will allow the person to introspect themselves better when they are on that journey. That's what I feel. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, just my sharing. Could you please tell me when these students go over and then they come back and they learn different things, or maybe they discover something about themselves, other than this colleague of yours or your friend of yours who has gone on to be a manager of one of the charity, what other learnings or directions these students go into when they eventually have some kind of self-realization, or they learn something? Is it always in the field of charity?
To answer your second question first, I think when students come back with their learnings, the first inclination that they will probably have is, are they going to continue this kind of projects? That's the first. We have students, actually, it depends on what types of discussions you had during the team. So, and the kind of projects that you do, whether it's a social project, academic project, cultural project, that will give them different perspectives, and it probably affects how they think. I think what we want to achieve through all the discussion is really about how they look at issues, on the ground. And as a facilitator of the team, I think what we want to see is that kind of growth, like what I said, when they first come to me and they tell me that they want to help the community, until they come back and they tell me actually they have learned more from them and they understand how complex poverty is. I have students who went on who are in doing economic policies, foreign policies, and of course I think that will help them shape some of the ideas that they have. So I think in terms of what they learn, it's kind of varied, and it really depends on how you facilitate that. Yeah.
I should clarify that my earlier comment about service back in Singapore, that's within the context of that number game and the KPI thingy that we had to deal with. And when I was in SIF, I think we were trying to also convince them that, hey, it's not about engineering local community projects for them to take on so that we can report X percentage of students came back and did this and that. So that's what I was referring to, because I would want to see them contributing to the local community and also overseas. What would be different? I think generally I believe they'll be a better person, because values of respect and humility cuts across all areas of their lives. Secondly, in whatever service project that they are doing now, they would do it in a better way, because I would like to think that they have learned to serve. A lot of them, a lot of girls have actually done a lot of service during their year 1, 2, 3, 4, but after the trip, they expand their notions of service. So I'm sure that they will serve differently, and I believe in a better way, So that's yeah, and that's where I'm coming from. Yeah, and I think also there are also personal aspects. Yeah.
I was just thinking that regarding your first question, why do people always ask, why don't you volunteer back home and going overseas? I think a lot of people will see, like what is blockchain was saying, are we using this experience as the tool to groom local volunteers? Should that be the way that we are looking at things? And why are we saying that those who go overseas will not come back? Is that an assumption? And why is this being questioned in the first place? I think it doesn't mean that people going overseas are not coming back, but it also doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, but somehow people keep linking these issues together, and I think for me, we try to see it differently. Yeah. Yeah, we do talk about, like what I say, it really depends on the facilitator. Yeah, I mean, there are some teams who actually do poverty in village and they have a local project. If they do it meaningfully and not being forced a project, that could be the similarity that we draw upon. Yeah, definitely the learning from local and overseas is different. Yeah.
Oh, the mic is resistant.
Hi, I'd like to ask about, because when we enter the community, we enter from a position of privilege, as someone mentioned. So doesn't it give rise to a sense of savior complex on the volunteers' part? How do we try to mitigate or dispel this complex? And what are the repercussions, especially on the dignity of our so-called beneficiaries?
It's actually about the value addedness of our projects. So I feel that there's a large focus on the outcomes on the part of the volunteers and the facilitators. It feels that we are measuring success in terms of like sustainability of like their future projects. Are they going to volunteer back in the local setting? But it feels that we are not really focusing on the sustainability and the success for the actual beneficiaries, so to speak. I think some of the panelists have mentioned how in terms of their English proficiency is quite lacking, even up to now. Some of the local teachers, they still can't speak very good English. So from the standpoint of a volunteer, are we really value adding to their lives when they go over a short span of 1 to 2 weeks? Yeah.
Actually, that's an easier question to answer. Okay, for the place that I go to, I like I mentioned, the secondary school teacher cannot really converse. But interestingly, over the past 4 years that they've been there, we have seen so many villager kids who are able to speak. So like, let's say I go to a recce trip in June and my actual trip is in December. I actually can see a huge difference in the language proficiency of a child. As in, so like in June, it could be that they cannot speak a word. As in, maybe they're shy, or like because they just started learning not long ago. But in half a year, they actually can speak quite a lot. So in terms of that, then those are tangible outcomes. As in, while of course it's hard to track again, like is it 1, 2, or 3 students who are like that? But then that again then lies on the NGO side, where you are saying, actually from our point of view is, for the volunteer trip to be meaningful, it's really a multifaceted thing. While I started off my conversation saying that the leader is very important, because that really determines how much the volunteer learns, how meaningful the project is. But at the same time, the NGO is also really important in the whole picture. So certain projects that we work with, the NGO is really strong. They already has a scope. Like when we work with Love Cambodia, the vision of it would be
hygiene. They are strong on hygiene issues. So what volunteers do there would be building of toilet and then English education. But the main focus of the NGO would be on the hygiene issues. While Hope in Light, where I work with in another village, they are looking at English language. So they are really specific into that area, and in a way, whether the impact is there or not, it largely depends on the NGO, as in terms of how good the NGO is, because most of the time you will not be on the ground. But at the same time, we always remember that while you are one volunteer, there are a lot of volunteers going throughout the whole year. Because, I mean, the NGOs reach out to different people. And that little bit that each person contribute would actually make up what do you call that? You know, the kind of analogy, drops of water become sea in the ocean. Yeah, but that it really do transcend. But to me, that area, I always feel that the NGO is quite responsible for that. But then again, it would be on the onus of the leader to ensure that it's a dependable NGO that's on the ground, working on the ground on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, and then the work that we as volunteers go in to contribute in would be XXX. That means there's a stipulated thing that you do there. Yeah, and that's also, so just now Valerie mentioned what Edge Empathy does in terms of that poverty simulation, where we get volunteers to think before they go, like what is your role exactly as a volunteer? So that's where I mentioned, are you the NGO or not? You know, because a lot of people may not think so. When I first started volunteering, the question would be, do you adopt a village? And I think there are people who adopt a village. And but when we discuss about that, then we realize that, okay, so if you adopt the village, does it mean that nobody else goes to the village? And does it mean that the village depends on you? And does it mean that there's no governing NGO that is looking after this village's needs and the progress? So that's where then we'll ask, because there's a lot of talk, especially I talked to some volunteers who volunteer in the Philippines, GK. Yeah, so they say that GK actually charges a lot. And they feel that this money can be put to better use, and they want to bypass GK. Then I will always, I wouldn't say that I have an answer, because I don't work with GK. But I would say you really have to question whether they are doing value-added service towards the community there, because they are the ones who are there most of the time. And as a leader of the team, then your responsibility is to make sure that the NGO is responsible. Yeah. Then the other responsibility for you as a leader would be towards your volunteers. That's what we are talking about in the rest of the conversations.
Yeah, even though I lead groups as an educator and it's an educational program, my primary concern actually is the community. So the students' learning for me actually comes second. And I usually tell my students, if I get angry with you, it will be because you have not acted in a way that is respectful of the community. Why? Because I found that in learning how to serve, all the learning that I want for my students is embedded there. So as long as they learn how to serve properly, learn how to do no harm, what I want out of the program, the educational objectives are embedded there already, apart from the personal development side. So the community part is central. And it's the same thing, the keyword is do no harm. Whatever you do, make sure you do no harm. Yeah.
Any other add-ons? Or maybe we move on to the first question, which is about desire for sex, right? You guys want to take on this question?
Probably small all the way. You want to take over?
remind everyone is when you go over, you kind of come from a position of privilege, right? So, sorry, hold on. So you go over, you come from a position of privilege. So how do you kind of mitigate this aside of you're going over to help because you're better? How would educators or even like how can we prepare students who are going to not have this mindset?
I think like being privileged doesn't really I think like even we come from a position of privilege, it doesn't really mean that we are far more powerful or capable of like helping. I think when we got there, I think maybe in terms of privilege, we are privileged in the sense that perhaps we have the power to make decisions. We have the freedom of choice, the freedom of action, and we have the freedom to decide on what we want to do or how we want to help, if you put it that way. But I think being there, for example, there's this part on building, when we're building with them, we are privileged, but I don't think, we are learning from them at the same time in building, and we're working together with them. And I think about savior complex, I think it depends on our actions and attitude that we want to take when we're there. Like, being privileged doesn't mean that you have to help. I think it's also a two-way process where you learn also.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree with Shi. I think that to answer the first question about whether there's a savior complex, I don't think it's uncommon. I think given like our upbringing and our culture and how OCIP can sometimes be perceived as, it's not very uncommon when you go there and feel as if you will go and do something great or you're definitely going to help and contribute in a very big way. But personally, I feel that going there with a savior complex is okay, but as long as you're willing to be questioned and to be open to considering alternative perspectives. So I think one thing that sort of helped me personally was that there's a lot of interaction and connection with the locals. And when I began to see service as part of like a relationship with them and a friendship with them, that's when I began to see that there's no need for us to always be the ones helping. And when we go there and interact with them, when we see them in their element, and for example, like what Shane was mentioning, like how the builders, they're really much better at us than building as can be expected. And we went fishing with them, they were really much better than us also. And it's through all these interactions, this first-hand connection that we have with them, that you see their strengths also, and you don't think of yourself as being more powerful or greater than them. So I think having that genuine connection there, that real interaction with them, will definitely mitigate this savior complex, as well as the willingness to be open and to question yourself, and to just keep going on this journey of becoming like a better server. No, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So much.
I think one story that I always share with my students, and I think it humbles me when I always think of this story that I shared with me, and how generous these people are letting us into their village. Because when we go, we stay in their village houses. I ask my students question like, would you ever vacate your HDB flat to let 30 strangers come into your house and stay for 2 weeks? And then they were like, oh yeah, that was what we were actually doing when we go over to the village. Because when we stay at the village, it's actually somebody's house, and they have to actually move to somewhere or stay in the court just to let us stay in their house. So I think these are the questions that we try to think about and let them think about, and I think we do not really have to. The good thing about this whole OCIP thing is that there's a lot of things that you don't have to tell them, but once you put some questions in their head, they'll start to think, are we really the person that is more privileged? Yeah. And are we the savior, or are they trying to, or actually we are the privileged ones in the sense that we have all these very generous people here that is giving us this opportunity to come and learn.
I think I suspect what Kai Xing meant when he said that it's okay, what it means is that sometimes you cannot deal with it before the trip. They have to learn it, they have to unlearn it, so to speak. Yeah, and it is a process of dissonance and realization and reality check. Then they begin to realize, hey, look, no, I'm not really helping anyone in a great deal. I think the teacher or the educator highlighting this is important. I think getting them to go beyond measures of success is important. A lot of Singaporean adolescents have got a very narrow measurement of success. Getting them to unpack what respect means, yeah, respecting people for who they are and so on. Just appreciation of diversity, you know, seeing the strengths in others. I think that's another thing that we always focus on. Look at the strengths of the communities rather than the gaps. Yeah, and all these things they begin to put themselves in a proper and more humble position. And then after a while, I think they do realize it. And then Mother Teresa, or supposedly Mother Teresa's quote is always widely used. Oh, we can do no great things, but only small things with great love, that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't know whether she really said that, but something like that. Yeah. But we need to sort of be very conscious of that.
Thank you. So we actually have time for one last question, and I think the last question goes to someone already has a mic. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm asking. Hello. Okay. Never mind. Okay, I'm Janice. I'm so sorry I'm taking the last question. Anyway, just a response to the savior complex thing, right? Like, because I recently, like, a group of us were discussing about that, and not only just in OCIP, but I feel that it's prevalent also in the local community service, that we go in, like, for example, I'm in the healthcare sector, so we go in and help education, like, hey, you should eat less salt, you should drink more water, you should exercise more. There's already inherently a power difference that's within the local community service that we do, but we also don't realize it. But perhaps it's more augmented when we travel all the way to another country, and it could be augmented, the savior context in a sense. So I really agree with one of the response that I feel that it's the nature of the community engagement that sometimes really just, like, for example, like us distributing rations to elderly, going block to distribute, us having the financial capability to buy things, versus us just interacting with the elderly, just befriending the elderly. I think it's a lot of difference, like the nature of the community engagement that's carried out during the OCIP. So that's like something that the facilitator or the leader can try to craft into the OCIP experience. Okay, just a random note. But my question, right, is actually pretty similar, like adding on to the previous, the person who asked the previous question before the savior complex or after the savior complex, regarding the impact of the work that we do there. So, like, from what I hear is a lot about how the NGO works and how we augment and we complement with what the NGO does. It's very important, like, how Pingsy actually has a very good feedback system, really understanding the community in order for whatever that we work to go. Because the scene of our OCIP now is that every year there's a different team, there's 12 different members that go there. Hardly would there be one person that browse themselves there. So I'm just wondering, in the whole big, okay, and sometimes it's quite disturbing to me that so many people, so many teams go down to Cambodia. You know, when you go down during holiday, see so many Singaporeans, but anyway, so I'm just wondering, does it make sense for maybe NYC or YT to, I'm just throwing out this idea that maybe y'all can discuss, I don't know, but like invest, even though it's probably not in the interest of NYC to do this, but I feel that we go in for the better of the community, and I think the best way to do it is to invest on one person or a salaried paid person to actually work with the NGO, because there are very good NGOs that come up with a 5-year plan. They don't restrict the project work scope, but they have a plan, they have a good measurement outcome to actually bring the community out of the poverty. And that whole 5-year work plan is really about community empowerment. So the things that you do is really set in place a framework, and groups go in, complementing, doing skill-based volunteering based on like this 5-year work plan. So they can work with different OCIP groups from different countries, but there's this overarching this work plan that's in place for the community, tailored to the community. So I was just wondering, does it make sense for like maybe NYC or YP to invest a Singaporean that goes down and actually be that anchor point, so that when groups go in, there is that person to ground it lah. But of course, I'm not sure practically. Maybe it's happening now. I don't know. Yeah, so just throwing it out.
We try to do that when we were in SIF to different degrees of success. Some of the staff were based in the university, some were in the NGO and so on. But with the current model that NYC has, I don't think that's feasible. I think, to go and use Jinghu money to go and employ someone overseas is very, very difficult. But it's a really good idea. Yeah.
Actually, on that note, right, we're going to invite someone who's trying to solve that problem, the whole information problem, the whole lack of continuity problem. So we're going to get him to speak a little bit later. But I think this concludes the end of our panel discussion. Thank you so much, panelists, for coming here today.
About the savior mentality, savior complex thing, Google To Hell with Good Intentions by Ivan Illich, Ivan and Illich. It's a very good article for your students to read first and to unpack, and he's really good, yeah.
So thank you once again for joining.